Dear Lord, thank you that we can come together and study, and even in a world that's in a very dark place, even with the hurts that we feel, even with how difficult some of the truth is to hear and how it shows us our own defects of character. In all of this, it can feel like a little taste of heaven, and we look forward to eternity and learning and knowing more and more, and to study again with the people who we love, but who aren't with us tonight. We pray that you'll be with us and guide us as we consider your messages for this time. And we thank you that you have not left us in such a dark time in world history with no guidance, with no light to shine in front of our feet. I pray this in Jesus' name, amen. Last week we covered again the complexity of history. I tried to illustrate that a little more as far as emphasize how important and beautiful the simple is, that we're not saying that there's something wrong with it, but it can be manipulated and warped. And we made that point by especially going back to the end of ancient Israel, which is the only really biblical history we have to show us what success looks like. And it was this simple prophecy given by the Holy Spirit to the father of John the Baptist that sets him up for failure because it looks so simple and just so clear. So it's really a lesson for Adventism today. We went into a few different thoughts after that. We did touch on Daniel 11:41, but that's I think that's a whole new field and perhaps a little bit more problematic than a simple. It can be oversimplification can make it. So I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go back to Daniel 11:41. Outside of where we headed towards the end of last week's Vespers, does anyone have any thoughts or questions through the week that have arisen that you thought that you didn't get, either you thought of last week but didn't get to ask, or that have come up through the week, related to what we've been covering, but just not on not that later digression? Just want to give anyone an opportunity. All right. So this movement was, you could argue, right wing, and it swung to the left wing in the history of 2018, 2019, and
majority.
What caused that? What brought us from the right wing to the left wing? I see a hand raised. Who raised their hand? Ngata Karima. I'm sorry if I don't pronounce your name accurately. I will not be offended if you correct me every single time. I will take correction and want to learn. But you had your hand raised. Was there something you wanted to say? All I'm going to do is take us back to where we left off and continue. So I'd rather hear from you. If you're able to unmute, you're free to speak if you like.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to just to understand a brief view on the left and right, of where we are in between these two. Oh, the understanding of our position as a movement.
So where we are today?
Yeah. Present time, yeah.
You weren't with us for the early studies of these, but
Yes, that's
where
correct.
we understood was that at these beginning, those weren't recorded, I'm sorry. This is about where we were as a movement from 1989 to 2018. And then in 2018 and 2019, because of the Midnight Cry and the messages associated with that, we moved from here to this political spectrum, left wing. I haven't really gone further to define exactly where we are, because I don't think it's really that simple to say, you know, we're here on the left wing or we're here on the left wing, because I'm not sure if we'd really know what that means, the difference between here and here. But we're going to go into a discussion of the left wing, breaking it down, various left wing perspectives, and some of the problems with the left wing. So we are here today. We're here today because of the prophetic messages we understood in 2018 and 2019. And we're listing those, the key prophetic messages that moved us from the right wing to the left wing. So of about, perhaps there's more, perhaps it's an incorrect list or a too simplistic list, but there was about 4 prophetic points of doctrine that caused us to make this switch. We've listed 2, and coming back to this topic in the class now, I want us to list the other 2. So the first 2 are understanding the history of our reform line of 1989, of what led up to 1989. If you've been joining prayer meeting, I believe Raymond Stanton has been explaining this history of the moral majority, explaining how our understanding of the moral majority caused this right-wing, left-wing swing. There's also, I believe that Graham will also cover in some presentations the studies of Pyrrhus and Ipsus, that Greek history that's found kind of hidden in Daniel 8 verse 8, that also helped us understand the 2016 election and a lot about politics today. So we're listing the 4 points that moved us from here to here. 4 points that were kind of embedded in the 2018 messages. So to directly answer your question, as a movement, we're here. Exactly where I think gets a little bit more complicated, but where we are going to discuss more of the left wing. Does that answer your question satisfactorily?
Yes.
Or?
Oh, yeah. As we move on, I'll probably get a clearer picture.
Sure.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. It just takes time to process.
It does, which is why that was taught in 2018 and we are discussing it in 2022. So you're not alone there. But if you have questions or thoughts along the way, please speak again.
All right, thank you.
No worries. So we covered the first 2. History, the moral majority, Pyrrhus and Ipsus. Has anyone had thoughts on these other 2? Josephine, your hand is raised.
Sorry, Elder Tess, my hand was raised for the question you originally asked. I hadn't thought about those 2 yet. Give me some minutes and I will.
It's fine. You can ask your original question if it's still...
No, I was going to answer, but I think you've done a fine job. I'm happy to sit back and listen.
Oh, I should have picked up on your hand. I would have liked to hear your answer.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm happy to hear you rather than my voice.
I would respectfully disagree. So these are the two. They weren't all taught immediately in 2018. I think one of them I might have taught in December of 2018, partly because of this resistance, that people were resisting what had been taught in Arkansas. Any thoughts on number 3, number 4? Lynn?
Taking a risk. Was it Acts 27 that you started to teach, where you started to see the corporate lines, the structure lines, as opposed to the what am I trying to say? I'm not sure the word you used, but you had corporate. I don't know. You had the church and the state lines, like the Seventh-day Adventist and the state line, the USA. Anyway, that might not be the right answer, obviously. So
I'm not sure if in Acts 27 you would get the justification for the left wing. Try to remember the earlier part of the line of Acts 27, as it shows the ship going off course. And it doesn't really go into the subject of racism so much. It doesn't go into what was the political issue for the Millerites. So I would probably,
okay.
I don't think that would quite bring you there.
Well, the other thing that I would think of would be when we started to have a look at the early presidents and understanding Abraham Lincoln, and that he wasn't necessarily the big positive character that we thought. And then I think we started to look at the influences of Republican Democrats and right and left and that there. But anyway, that's my thoughts. So obviously I'll be keen to hear the right answers.
Sure. I think most of that came later, like in 2020, because if we talk about Abraham Lincoln, we're starting to criticize the left wing, where we'd swung to. So that would take us back to here. If we can please not answer in the chat, if we can raise our hand and then answer verbally once I call you. But Molly, you're heading somewhere I like. Are you able to unmute?
Yeah,
What were your thoughts?
I was thinking of the true stream of information when you created by the study of Act 27.
So I would suggest that two streams of information ties into both of these, both the third and the fourth. So if you were to look at our reform line, we'll do the priests. What key waymark would you associate with two streams of information? Any thoughts, Molly? Do you have a key waymark? You would say, yeah, that's where I see two streams.
2014 and 19.
Yep. But I would suggest before then. Because you're seeing the two streams really conflict there, but this is the Sunday law. And I'd suggest you need to see the two sides before you get to the Sunday law.
So 2012.
2012?
Yeah.
Why 2012?
Because Elder Jeff was starting to oppose go against the message with the time setting and all that.
So I can see you're going to the internal, which is fine. If you were to consider the external, though, if you were to consider externally information, two sides of information, two streams of external information.
It'd be 9/11.
Why 9/11?
The conflicts of the Islam when they come into the scene.
We do see we see a split there.
Yeah, the CNN and
When
the
is
Fox.
CNN created? If we go to an inception point, what is the antithesis of CNN? Am I using that word correctly?
I think CNN went
Antithesis,
way
the
back.
opposite. CNN and
Fox, isn't it?
yes, exactly. When is Fox created?
No, 89.
Not quite, a bit after. It's created in 96.
Okay.
So you've brought us to two streams of information. You brought up CNN, and I said if you're going to talk about CNN, then think of its opposite, because there's two streams, two sides, CNN, then we need to think of Fox. And when are those information streams created? And they're created in 1996, along with a host of others. So if we're going to talk about information streams, two sides in an information war, in a social culture war, then we find their inception point in 1996. And I get why you can see facets of that at every waymark after. There is catalysts in 1989, of course, but these two powerful sides formalize in 1996. And we know that 1996 is the first, really the prototype of a formalization in this message, because that is when the Time of the End magazine is created. Is that okay, Molly?
Yes, clear now.
That makes sense? So the first of these other two, I wanted to put down was an understanding of 1996, because our concept of that prior to 18 was, yes, it's the formalization. Our focus is on the internal. We have the Time of the End magazine. We have Daniel 11:40-45, reform lines, all getting formalized. But what we needed to see in the time period of the Midnight Cry was what was also getting formalized was these two influential, powerful, external streams of information that are going to take opposing sides in a culture war. And the Sunday law, past and future, all center on this culture war. So that is why understanding 1996 and two streams was an integral part of this right-wing, left-wing swing. Because if we got the problems with the Republican Party through the moral majority, if we got that Clinton should have rightfully won the 26 election from the Battle of Ipsos, then you know which side in 1996 was the good stream, and you know which side in 1996 is the bad stream, because Fox News was the mouthpiece for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is Demetrius in the Battle of Ipsos, and Donald Trump is supported by Jerry Falwell, son of the original creator of the moral majority. So 1996, understanding the external formalization of two streams is going to connect with Ipsos, which is going to connect with understanding the moral majority to show us why not just Donald Trump needs to be understood as a wrong stream of information, but news sources that are his conservative mouthpiece are very much dangerous as well. So I hope we can see how these points connect. 1996, the formalization, Time of the End magazine, but you also, whenever you have a true message formalized, you're also going to have opposition. There were quite a few hands up. Was everyone just wanting to suggest that, was this about where we were heading? Are your questions answered? So I won't go back to anyone who had their hands up. If the last few minutes haven't answered your point, then please raise your hand again. Or if you have a thought to share. Brendan.
I can see the logic with what Molly was saying and how you brought that about. I had another thought. My thought was what convinced me also to move. And I just remember looking at the studies on In God We Trust and Under God, and tracing that right from the Civil War and the North using In God We Trust and putting it on coins, and tracing that all the way through right up to the Project Blitz, what we see now. And from that, you can see who are the good and who are the bad guys. And so that also made me shift also. But I don't know whether that's your go. I'm just going off what helped me move. That's another one that helped me move. But that might be similar to the moral majority.
What I think might have happened is we understood the moral majority and then it blew up. Does that kind of make sense? We understood 79 to 89 and then it was connecting all of that to Billy Graham, to 1888 to 1863 to 1798. It's following, this point has rapidly expanded. So I think that's accurate. With this list here, if we brought it into 2019 and later points, I think it would grow. I guess I've restricted it a little to 2018 itself, because 2019 it did expand and our position has only grown stronger, I think. But no, I agree. Does anyone have any more thoughts to say on point 3? Josephine.
I don't know if I have thoughts on point 3, but I just wanted you to clarify if possible the connection of Demetrius to Trump. I sort of know that very well, but I'm having just for now, I can't make the connection. I know that Trump is dictatorial, but Demetrius, how's that connect to him?
Graham, do you feel comfortable answering Josephine's question? If no, that's fine. I'll have an attempt. But if you want to answer her. Because I understand that Graham has been looking into Ipsos.
I know the battle and Ipsos battle, but I'm just having a bit of difficulty. I know he was defeated during the Battle of Ipsos when his horses charged. I don't know when I'm going wrong. He was. Yeah. Go ahead.
I can try, but in 2 minutes, it'd be hard to justify it. So Antigonus and his son Demetrius fought against the allies of Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Cassander. Antigonus and Demetrius were on the same side, fighting the same three allies that were joined together. Demetrius was supported by Pyrrhus. Pyrrhus was the king of the south in that time. When we make an application of it, we look at Antigonus, whose name means like the ancestor, and we align Antigonus with Hillary Clinton, and we align Demetrius with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is assisted by the king of the south at that point.
I got it.
Is that okay, Josephine? Sorry, were you done, Graham?
Yes, I understand from now on. I'm just, for a minute there, my mind was blurred, but I do know that what he's explained, and he'd done a really good job. Yeah, that came really clear to me. I got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I think Graham's going to be leading us through Ipsos at prayer meeting. So there will be a deeper delving into that history and application. But if that's satisfactory for now, then he broke down the application.
Yeah, that's very good. I don't know why I forgot it, because I've been studying that, and then for a moment there, it was blurred in my mind. Yeah, thank you very much, Graham, and thank you, Elder Tess. I'm happy.
I know the feeling well. So we have history of the moral majority, seeing evangelical Protestantism unite with a particular political party. We see how by 2016, partly due to that uniting, but also just what has happened within the Republican Party itself, we see the election of Donald Trump, and we know how to understand that election, partly because of our understanding of Daniel 8:8 and how that verse blew up. Then we understand that there are these two sides with information streams, news sources that need to be carefully sifted, also connected to the formalization of this message in the same year, at the same waymark, 1996, CNN, Fox, and that also can be expanded quite a lot. 1996 was a heavy year for information. If everyone is fine with point 3, point 4. I think this is the point that might have been not taught in September of 2018, but December. If I remember that correctly. Lots happened since then. Still connected to two streams of information. It's really this third point, but connected to the fourth, it makes it so much stronger. Any thoughts? Hint. Does what happened in 1996 only affect the priests? CNN, Fox. Is it only the first group that's affected by these external information streams? I'll have to pick on someone then. Greg.
Nothing really to mind. Yeah.
Is it only you and I that are affected by the different perspectives of CNN and Fox?
Oh no, it's everybody in the world.
Everyone.
Mm.
So what do you want to call them?
Yes. Levites and Nephilim.
So Levites and Nethinims are affected by 1996, two streams of information. How does that make it a much stronger point? Because if we just say 1996, two streams, that affects you, that affects me. But if we say that affects a Nethinim, how does that make it a much stronger point about this rightward-leftward swing? How important it is to get our politics right. Brody. She can't join, I'm on her internet.
Can I just, Greg's calling out to me to say that he can't hear you. He's something's gone wrong with his internet. So,
sure, no worries. Ray.
Is it because, like, if we understand that God's using those streams to teach other people, we can see sort of like by consequence what they're learning must be the same as what we're learning? I might have that back to front.
So let's just take one of them. That's the first group. Let's talk about the world. $1989.
I'm sorry, it's really bad for that to happen.
It's fine. It's really fine. Line of the Nethinims. I'm going to get confused. Where's the Sunday law for the Nethinims? When's their harvest? When do we say come out? Harvest. Come out, otherwise called the loud cry. So that's Sunday law. Daniel 12:1. So that's the line of the Nethinims. Raymond. Sorry, I've got them wrong. Always revert to the light of the 144,000. Raymond, state your point again.
So I'm not sure if I've got it right, but the way I was thinking was, if we can see God teaching them, even though they're sort of like not as developed in their understanding as we are, we should still be able to see what they're learning. And it has to be the same as what we've learned and what we're learning.
So they're learning, but you and I aren't teaching them.
Yeah, like God's teaching them completely independently of us.
When do we start teaching them?
Right at that bit where it says come out. Oh no, wait. Is it 2021? Oh no, that's the Levites. Next one along. Yeah, there.
So at the Sunday law?
Yeah.
I would agree with that. If we were teaching them before, we wouldn't wait till here to say come out, would we?
Yeah.
This is when we find the stone striking the statue and people have to come out of Babylon. So if we were teaching them here, we would be giving the cry here. We would be saying come out of what? We can only say come out, Babylon has fallen, once we see that fall. So if this is their harvest, then we have their ploughing, their early rain, and their latter rain. And you said, Ray, we're not doing that. We're not ploughing them, we're not giving them their early rain, and we're not giving them their latter rain. If we're not, who is?
So I would say God through external events.
God through external events. So we have an external event. We have Putin is going to invade Ukraine. So Putin attacks Ukraine. And we have CNN say, that's awful. And we have Fox say, what a genius. Who wouldn't want to expand their empire? So you have CNN and Fox. You have one singular external event, but you have two different perspectives of it. And what you're saying is the Nethinims of the world, that this is how they're being taught, either from one stream or another stream, either in a positive sense or a negative sense. Is that all right? Do you want to expand on that thought at all, or disagree with me?
I think the only thing that I would sort of add to this is when this was explained, I understood that like why we don't do public evangelism, like the penny dropped for me, or our position on public evangelism when this was taught. Before that, I didn't get it.
Yes. And it's really good that prior to 2019, we didn't do any public evangelism either. That would have been a mess. So, yes, we call them out here because prior to here, it's all about Adventism. This is what waymark for ancient Israel. Josephine. What is this for ancient Israel?
Oh. Is that's not 1844?
Ancient Israel, not modern.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, yes, I know. Is that 70 AD?
The Sunday law of our time period? No.
No, that would be before that. Okay, with the cross.
Think about the stages of the work. Because this
Okay.
is when we're saying we're not allowed
Oh,
to
yes,
go
the Pentecost.
evangelize the world. Sorry?
Is that the Pentecost?
Who do the disciples go to at Pentecost?
They went to Judea, to the Jews.
To the Jews.
Yeah.
So you have disciples, then the disciples go back to the Jews.
Yes.
Who aren't they allowed to go to?
Not to the Gentiles yet.
They're not allowed to go to the Gentiles yet. So first of all, God is going to teach the disciples, and then they are allowed to go back to the Jewish nation and give the Jews a second chance. All of that has to happen before God will allow them to go to the Gentiles.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's
So
all
if we
true.
come to the Sunday law, Daniel 11:41, where would you put that for ancient Israel?
They were going to the harvest. Is that for the harvesting the Jews?
If we harvest the Jews here, who do we start harvesting here?
The Nephilims?
After their probation closes. This is Daniel 12:1. The time of trouble. Do we not call people out of Babylon until the time of trouble?
No, we call them before, isn't it?
Where before?
At the loud cry.
The loud cry. So we're going to call people. Call who? Who are we calling? You've got three choices.
So where the Jews have been called, they're not the Jews, the Levites have been called.
So this is the calling of the Levites?
Like Sunday law, we call the Levites.
Then you would say that this is Pentecost. And then it's here that we go to the Gentiles world.
To join us and the Levites. Is that kind of way off?
What's Daniel 12:1?
Standing up. What's his name? The words.
What happens there? If this is, I know it's not fitting the parable exactly. If this is October 22, what happens there?
Well, October 22 is, you mean the real thing that happens October 22nd? Christ goes to the most holy.
What we associate with October 22 is a door being shut.
Judgment. Yeah.
Judgment. You have a shut door, a judgment, a time of trouble such as never was. No one can join in this time period.
So that
After
means
that
the
door
Nephilim
gets
have to be before when the door is shut. They'll have to be before.
It has to be before. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We're old model, old model where Jesus was coming back in 1888 history. We're fleeing to the mountains. You can't, unless we run and shout, you can't call people out of Babylon if we are physically fleeing.
Yeah, that's silly.
Because this is in that model, what would have fitted 150 years ago. This is survival. We aren't going to work, we're hiding.
No.
So if we're hiding here, we have to be going to work before then. We have to do all our work before then. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's really clear. Sometimes you know those things, but when I hear your voice, it seems to sometimes just flush them out. I think it's nerves, maybe.
This is why interaction is so much of a better way to learn than just being told something.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a much better way to dialogue.
And I
So
appreciate
don't ever think that time or exercise is wasted. This is the best for all of us.
I appreciate that very much.
So our work is done here, and it happened for the disciples, for the end of ancient Israel. It happened in 3 stages. First, the disciples, then there was Pentecost. At Pentecost, they went back to the Jewish nation. They still weren't allowed to go to the Gentiles until here. When were they allowed to go to the Gentiles?
After the Jews, when they tested and they joined them, then they could take the message. Or when the way was opened up.
Yes, this was a time period. A time period of them doing that work. But we usually associate an event with this waymark. When the door shuts for the Jewish nation as an institution, which I know you're looking at Acts 27, it's essentially shipwreck for the Jewish nation. So you know we'd be calling that Sunday law, because that's shipwreck. And they go from talking to the church to talking to the world. And I'm just wondering if we associate an event with that waymark. A date, an event. Do you have any thoughts on this one? If you don't, that's fine. You've got the structure and the concept.
Well, maybe somebody else might come up with a thought.
Sure, and then I'll come back to you and see if it starts to gel. So I'll come back to you in a short space, if that's okay.
I'll be happy.
Rachel.
Is it the stoning of Stephen? The
Stoning of Stephen. I heard you, Josephine.
Yes, of course.
It was on the tip of your tongue, wasn't it?
Yes. 34 AD, yeah, sure.
That's what I get when I'm trying to do up the line of the Nethinims without saying all 4 at once. We get tangled. But is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
And you can see the parallels.
Yes, that's right.
With the Sunday law.
And I do know that very well. I just, was foraging in my mind.
But once the importance is once we see it, it all connects.
Yes.
Because it sounds, the reason I went through this is because it still sounds extreme to say we aren't doing public evangelism. It sounds like this extreme foreign concept, and I wanted to step through it just to remind ourselves, although it might still sound extreme, it's the same model that God used at the end of ancient Israel in the history of the first Advent. Jesus didn't come and go straight to the Gentiles or encourage that at all. They were shut off from doing that work until he had an opportunity to draw out a movement from his church and create a new church. And that is the same thing that is happening in the history of the end of modern Israel. First the church, then the world. So if we aren't allowed to go to the world till the Sunday law, like the disciples weren't allowed to go to the Gentiles until the stoning of Stephen, and this is their harvest, going back to the agricultural model, then they have to be plowed, early rain, latter rain, all before they get harvested. And Ray, it was you that brought us to this reform line.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Just in relation to that, please. I've been asked this week, so why is your movement, no, it's not my movement, why is your movement hiding all this information that you have? Why aren't you publicly sharing? And I was telling them about this Christ to the disciples, disciples to the Jewish nation, and then to the I said, we aren't hiding anything. It's in the internet. That's how I found the movement, by just searching the internet. Is this have kind of making sense, or why are we hiding? That was the question. And my answer was basically what you're teaching tonight. The disciples, Christ to the disciples, disciples to the Jewish nation, and then later on to the Nathanims, or the Gentiles, that's the word I used. But the question was, why is your movement hiding? If you have all this information, why are you hiding it? I said, we aren't. We have it in the internet. It's there. Where are you getting your information from? Did your leaders have affirmation? I mean, is God giving it to you? The information that you got. I said, I had that same question in my mind when I first came across the information. Where's the information? All this knowledge that I never learned before. Now I'm getting the opportunity to learn it. And it didn't take me long to realize it is truth. And when I realized it is truth, I didn't care to ask the question. I just knew that God has to be giving the leaders the information for the group. And so I never verbalized that question in my mind, because I was happy and content and satisfied to keep learning. But now I'm being asked the same question I never verbalized. I've been asked again. And while you're on that, I just wanted to mention, why are you people hiding? Is my explanation for that kind of satisfactory for now? It has to follow that sort of pattern?
I find it interesting that the same people asking those questions would be the same people that say God never changes. So God preferred male leadership 2,000, 4,000 years ago, when they would stick their stake in the ground and say God never changes. And yet they should go to the end of ancient Israel and see what God did. And they should consider whether or not they would ask the disciples, go ask Luke, go ask Peter, why are you hiding this from the Gentiles in 32 AD, in 33 AD? I don't think our message is hidden. I would agree with your response. There are people in this movement who came straight from the world, not from Adventism, and they were not rejected. We didn't turn them away. We welcomed them. They went through baptismal studies. Some have been baptized. It's not that we are deliberately hiding, but there are complexities just as there were for the end of ancient Israel. For the first part, from 1989 to 2019, the priests, the movement doesn't have a proper grasp on truths for itself. It needs to know what message it needs to bring. That would be like having the disciples go and teach Romans when they still thought that the Roman nation was about to be overthrown. If they were to go to a Roman centurion and say, "Don't you know we have a king and he's going to destroy your entire empire?" would have made some problems for themselves later on. So to go out to the world in 2016, 2017, and not clearly understand what was happening politically, both domestically in the United States and externally with their foreign policy, would not have helped many people. The message had to be straight for us. 2019 to 2021 is the time of trouble for the priests. It's a time period when there are a lot of complexities, a lot of problems, if I could say it that simply. As 144,000 go, they're still preparing their message to give this loud cry. And that has been happening through the history of 2019 to 2021 as well. So I think your answers are correct. It's a matter of, if they want to say that God never changes, if that is the methodology that they would want to approach Scripture with, then they should read the entirety of the New Testament and be consistent, I think. I don't think the disciples would be said that they were necessarily hiding, but there was a work has to be done decently and in order, especially as a work as serious as this one. One of the points I taught in January 2021, and why I have said that the teaching of radical feminism particularly began in January of 2021, is because I taught that for the Nethinims, their change of leadership happens here. So whoever has been teaching them, come by this point, we should start to see there are serious problems with the leadership of the world, the voices they're hearing. We know that we're doing that work of harvest. Any external stream is not capable of doing that, which is why it is so important we see the problems with the left wing as well. The left wing, however good it might look in 2019, is not capable of doing that work because they have endemic issues. So it is so important, the work this movement does. No one's joining this movement as a pre-made radical feminist. Well, there might be some, but most won't. We still have a lot to teach them. But everything done decently in order. The disciples, first of all, they had to get their message straight, which occurred from the birth of Christ to Pentecost. And then from Pentecost forward, it wasn't that the disciples had this great learning experience after Pentecost. It was that their first duty was to go to the church. And that's our work now. Like the disciples, the message is packaged. It was packaged when we understood LGBT and when we understood radical feminism. That packaging is done, but our first work is church. Only then can we have the united front that we need to do the work at the Sunday law. Is that okay, Josephine? I know that some of those answers, responses are not necessarily what you would say to them, but does that make sense? Help in any way? Josephine? Are you there?
Yeah, that's very clear. I'm sorry if I diverted you a little bit, but I had to ask because you were making the very points that I was trying to explain in the last week, in defense of the fact that we weren't hiding. I didn't know any more than what I just explained, but it makes a lot of sense to me. To mention it that way. It's almost like an order or a priority list. The priests have to be trained, but I couldn't tell them that we were priests. I didn't want to say that. I just said that there was no hiding. The movement wasn't hiding anything. It was all out there in the net. If you were really searching, want to know, you would find the message like I did.
I would suggest you take them back to the Gospels and the Book of Acts. You don't have to use that kind of parable phraseology they might not understand of priests, Levites, Nethinims, which...
Right, I didn't.
Yes, that will not make sense. But if they could just see the Gospels and the Book of Acts, they should see that God always works in a systematic order.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm gonna listen to the video again and again.
No worries. It's a good point to cover. So, history, moral majority, Pyrrhus, Battle of Ipsus, 1996, the formalization of the message. But that becomes, because there's a resistance to two streams of information in December of 2018. Particularly the line of the Nethinims, which, if you wanted to word that in another fashion, would just be the order of reform lines, which the movement should have been familiar with that concept, but by the end of 2018, it was the fundamental foundation. So those are the four that I had in mind. Is everyone okay with that? We're all good on that? And how they interconnect? That by the end of understanding all of that in the history of 2018, it was impossible to justify this position. It necessitated a swing to the Democrat Party politically. And connected with that party all the streams of information that characterize both sides. So, picking on someone, Brendan, how would you have a go defining what it means to be right-wing? Looking for just some simple concepts. What does the right wing stand for and what does the left wing stand for? And as we do this, if we could attempt to not answer prejudicially, like someone who is actually has a political position and doesn't like the other side, if we could just answer a little bit more factually, just from a point of view that I think would be accurate to describe the ethos of the two sides. You can start with left wing or right wing, either one.
Right wing are concerned. So right wing would be concerned about the morals as they interpret of the country. I guess you've written that there already, haven't you? It's already there.
Kind of want to ignore this for the moment, so don't be afraid to double up.
They generally have a biblical foundation that they stand on, and it all comes from that. So no matter what area they're looking at, they tend to frame it in a religious fight, I guess.
So there's no atheists in the right wing.
Well, there probably is. Of course, there is. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to characterize it.
I got to this point in our studies where I realized that just saying we moved from here to here was unhelpful to me if I didn't look in and understand what this side is and what this side is, what they subjectively stand for. So that's kind of what I want us to do now. We know we swung. While you think about that, Natakarima, your hand is up. You had a thought?
Yep, just based on the shift between the right to the left. Now, since the studies has moved on ahead of what I've really come back to understand is what's really shifting. Is it the moral mindset of the right wing that's shifting over to the left?
So is this about moral issues?
Or the moral mindset? So, like in the character changes between making that decision to shift to the left side. I guess there is more information that ties into that, but I haven't got that information. If that makes sense. It's just I just needed to understand the big picture before for the mindset of your right wing information, and then using that to switch over to the left side. So what made the decision for that information to shift to the left side?
I think you've cut out for a second. There?
Hello?
Hello, maybe that was my end. I think I cut out there. Could you repeat yourself, sorry?
Yeah, so when there's a character change between the right wing and the left wing, right? Are there changes between the mindsets? When I say mindsets, I guess it's probably more of the information base.
So if you look at the 2016 election and you look at Hillary Clinton and then you look at Donald Trump, they're just two people. But those two people represent so much. So much about how America should view itself, how much from how they perceive Russia to how they perceive Black Lives Matter, to how they perceive welfare, to how they perceive LGBT rights, to how they perceive concepts of religious freedom. So 2016 is kind of that litmus test where you see right wing versus left wing. If you don't mind, I'd rather not go into your question now, because what we're starting to do is define what the right wing stands for and then define what the left wing stands for. And after we've done that, I think we'll be better placed to discuss your question. It becomes difficult to answer your question until we've actually shown what right-wing politics stands for. Then we can go in and say, do we agree with this side or with this side?
Oh, yes, please. Yeah, I understand. Yep.
So I'm not ignoring your question. We might not get to it this week. Actually, we won't. We'll have to pick that up next week. But I'd like to define both sides before we go into that.
Yeah, I
If
understand.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Brandon, you've had some time to think about it.
Yeah, if I was to look at the overarching principles of each side, I would say the right conserves, they look back and tries to keep the status quo. So they look backwards, trying to preserve what has always been. That's why it's Make America Great Again, because they're always looking back to try and conserve all these topics. Whereas I guess the left, they're interested in progression, or looking forward, or no, an example is no, America hasn't attained the fullest democracy and freedom that it should. We need to keep progressing towards that, whereas the right would try and interpret the Constitution the way it used to be interpreted. So one looks forward to progress forward. The other looks back to try and conserve what has always been.
So I'm hearing just on that point.
From that foundation, so from that foundation, all these topics, whether it's traditional values, it all stems from that sort of methodology.
So I'm hearing conservative versus progressive, and those are political terms, which you're saying mean conservation versus progression. Am I hearing correctly?
Yeah, if I was something like that, if I was to try and label it very briefly, I'm sure other people have be able to fill lots of gaps in. I'm just trying to get the overarching principle.
Sure. That's a good place to start from. Graham.
A couple of the studies that you've done in 2018, you explained for me very well when you said the phrase, again being oversimplistic, that the two streams of information distorts how we perceive reality. And for, if we say the right-wing group or conservative group, you see a focus of America first.
Can I call that nationalism?
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of different titles we could give.
Thank you, Graham. Was your thought finished? That was what you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'll let others have a go.
Sure, thank you. Yes, that's a component I think is good to add in. Josephine, we'll add one or two more and then we'll pick this up next week.
The right wants to impact their morals. They want the right-wing people want to have a part in politics. They want to have their morals impact the government.
Can I put that under traditional values?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
You've described it a little differently, but I think the two can kind of be condensed into that one phrase. Right. Because when someone has their traditional say, traditional family values. That is what they would want to impact politically, you know, when you come to everything surrounding 2014 and gay marriage.
Yeah.
So I'll summarize. Were you done? Sorry?
Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
I'll just summarize. What we've done is we've added a couple of points to what caused us to swing from right wing to left wing. We have the history of the moral majority, seeing how republicanism and the Christian right united really in the 10-year history prior to our reform line, and how that set off a chain of events, how it led up to 2016 Ipsos, Donald Trump as representative of that Reagan-Falwell moral majority union. We've seen two streams of information externally, history of 1996, how that played out again in the history of Ipsos when you have these two sides. And then we see how important all of that is for the world once we call them out of Babylon. If we can't understand these two sides and where the people of God should stand on them, what hope is there when we go to the world? Because they're already being prepared for harvest by these two external sides, by how they respond to 2016 and Ipsos. Then we ask the question, wait a minute, what changed anyway? What does it mean to go from right wing to left wing? What is the ethos of the right wing, and what is the ethos of the left wing? And you've given a few different thoughts. Progress versus conservation. When they break that into political terms for people, you talk about progressives and you talk about conservatives. So I think that is a very accurate way to describe it. And then a little bit was expanded upon with the right wing, talking about traditional values and also tying in that sense of nationalism, which is particularly associated with the right wing. So when we come back, we're going to expand on those points a little bit, but I want a one-word title to describe the ethos of what the right wing stands for, and one word to describe the ethos of the left wing. What is the key phrase or key word that these two sides, what's the hill that those two sides are willing to die on, if I was to put it that way? And we will come and do that next week. But we are out of time. Catherine, would you, if you have questions, if you could hold them to next week, if that's okay, just because a few people will be mad at me if we don't. Please hold on to those thoughts and don't forget them during the week.
Dear loving and righteous God in heaven, we thank you so much for the studies that we've been able to do together. We thank you for the way that you've been leading us and the revision of how we have transitioned, and how amazing that is when you see a group of people do that. We ask that you would be with us for this Sabbath. We thank you for this special time of contemplation and rest and study of your word. It's a blessing to us. So we thank you for that. Thank you for the fellowship that we've been able to enjoy together as well tonight. And we ask you to be with us as we go forward. In Jesus' name we pray.